Hi everyone, and welcome to the live stream. I just want to make sure before we go any further that I am actually live. It says here that I'm live, but I can't actually see it on the YouTube channel. Let me have a look. Yes, we are. Yeah, it's working. Wow. Whoever gave me that advice to make sure that the mobile phone, I'll just turn it down now, turn the volume down. Belt and braces, we'll call this, just getting everything right so we know we're live. Good, well, welcome to the live stream. It's been a while, isn't it? It's all these triple headers. Got a few more to come as well this season, but it's a bit exhausting. So I hope you understand that we take a bit of a breather on the live streams, and we got 3 races in a row, plus putting out some other video as well, and other stuff that I have got another life as well, doing Formula One stuff and also non-Formula One stuff. Speaking of which, of course, it's the Rally de Canarias this weekend. They say it's in Spain. I mean, it's miles away from Spain, of course, Canary Islands. But WRC1 going to the Canary Islands should be brilliant. Ogier joining the Toyota team, rejoining. He's got an on-off season again. So all the top players there, can't wait to watch that on Rally TV. Should be brilliant. I was up in La Nucia during the Easter break, where they staged a round of the Spanish Rally Championship last year. Unbelievable roads. Up and down the hills, hairpins, sort of roads you just don't think exist anywhere in the world anymore, but they do, and they're there. Just beautiful surfaces as well. Took the Hyundai i20N up there and had some fun. Yeah, that's one of the things I was doing, I guess, away from Formula One. But apart from that, yeah, pretty much head down and get on with it. And lots to talk about, of course, as we look back at the opening races of the 2025 season. Oscar Piastri now at the top of the World Championship table, by 10 points from Lando Norris, his McLaren teammate, 12 points from Max Verstappen, who's doing pretty well in a car that obviously isn't as good as the McLaren. And we'll see from here on in whether Red Bull get it together on a consistent basis. But if you're a Red Bull Max fan, then, or just a Formula One fan in general, I think we all would have been impressed by how good the Red Bull was over the race distance in Saudi Arabia. Not that it's the hardest circuit in the world in terms of time management and general balance and grip, but nonetheless, it was pretty good. And Max had, you could say, a race-winning car underneath him, even though he had pressure from Oscar. Would have had pressure from Oscar all the way, but as it happened, it all went away on the first corner. No doubt there'll be lots of chat about that coming up. I've got a couple of things that I just wanted to talk about, which come under the heading of well, you should see what it was like back then, or this particular one does. You know, I've been going on about how I think Lando not taking his hands off the wheel as he hit the wall in his qualifying shunt was just an indication of the sort of pressure he's under and how he's not really thinking as clearly as maybe he should at this stage. Things like that are pretty basic. I mean, you're going to hit a wall hard, you're going quickly, you take your hands off the wheel, because the whiplash through the wheel as you hit any sort of barrier potentially can just snap your wrist. And I would say in my Formula One lifetime, I would say there have been at least 10 drivers that have broken wrists due to not taking their hand off the wheel as they hit a barrier. And it's sort of taken for granted now. I think Daniel Ricciardo was the last guy not to do it at Zandvoort. And I think ever since then, it's been a real wake-up call, isn't it? But yet Lando kept his hand on the wheel. Okay, he got away with it, but, you know, it was pretty worrying. But anyway, on the back of that, quite interesting. Charlie Lucas, one of the great people, racing people, very good friends with Frank Williams in the early days, very fast racing driver in his own right, started the Titan Formula 3 team, very, very great car control in everything he ever had, and just a wonderful guy. Famous, actually, though, and I hope Charlie doesn't mind me saying this, Sheridan Finn, my great colleague at Williams, who was also part of the whole Frank Williams Harrow Road flat with Jochen Rindt, Jonathan Williams, and lots of others sleeping on the floor in that famous flat in the Harrow Road in North London, Northwest London. Sheridan was one of those, and he went to Eton, like a couple of the others, and it was all very dry humour, as you can imagine, even when they were kids racing minis or whatever they were doing. And Sheridan once said to me, we were talking about Charlie Lucas. This will give you an idea what Charlie Lucas was like, and it probably still is. At the premiere of, or one of the first airings anyway, of Dr. No, when it came out in '63, I think it was a big deal. You know, it's the first, I think it was the first Bond movie, the first proper Sean Connery Bond anyway. And they're at the premiere in the Empire Leicester Square, and they're showing. There's a lot of racing people there. And when Ursula Andress comes out of the water, with the shell and everything. Charlie shouts out in the middle of the cinema, "Gosh, what a swizz! In the books, she didn't have her top on." And of course, you get all those kids laughing at the time, those racing kids. Frank was there as well, Sherry. And yeah, and so it goes on. Anyway, Charlie sent me this picture of Frank Owen Garville Williams. Here he is, hands off the wheel. This is Roskilde Ring, I think it's about 1965. And Frank's racing, that's Frank in number 24 there, racing his Cooper Formula 3 car. He wasn't bad, he had a couple of, certainly some top tens, and I think he won a race once in England, I think, and he had some podiums. He was pretty wild, but pretty good, pretty wild, as you can see there. So he's actually going against the flow of the traffic, as you can see. Hands off the wheel there, Frank. Yeah, no chance of broken wrist there. Not quite sure what he's trying to say to the other drivers, like, watch out, you're about to hit me, or not. Keep away. Yeah, good old Frank. Yeah, brilliant. So thank you very much indeed for that one. Charles Lucas also points out that race was the famous race where he was actually entering a car, Formula 3 car, for Peter Gethin, who went on to win, as you know, the 71 Italian Grand Prix for BRM, but great McLaren Can-Am Formula 5000 driver, great Formula 3, Formula 2 driver, just brilliant in everything he did. I was a big fan of Peter Gethin always. And his father, of course, Ken Gethin, was a jockey who raced in the Grand National. So, yeah, sporting blood in the Gethin family. And for many years, sadly, before he passed away, he ran the racing school at Goodwood. Before Goodwood sort of was rediscovered and rebooted, it was a lot of Peter Gethin hard work there. Anyway, according to Charlie Lucas, Peter Gethin, well, there was a big drama at that race because there was some sort of police arrival with a paternity suit brought against Peter Gethin, and Charlie said he had to evacuate Peter Gethin in the boot of his Ford road car to get him out of the circuit. They were the days, as you can say, as we always say, don't we? Other news? Good to hear that Malcolm Wilson is going to play, looks like he's been nominated, but I think that probably means he is going to be playing a big role with the FIA as a sporting director, something like that, in the sporting side anyway. I guess it's going to be non-Formula One, but good man. A lot of time for Malcolm Wilson. Of course, he runs M Sport today, the Ford WRC1 rally team. But before that, I mean, he's mega quick rally driver himself. Very close ties to Ford. And when Ford officially pulled out, all credit to Malcolm that he kept it all going with M Sport. And it sort of quasi-works Ford backing now. Not much quasi, but not much works either. But nonetheless, they have the Ford name, obviously. And they do a very good job, considering the limited budget they're on. And great to see Malcolm Wilson there being given an opportunity with the FIA. And for the FIA to be employing somebody like that, I think speaks quite well of what they're doing, certainly on the rallying side anyway. Malcolm will have some good ideas, I think, on how to get rallying sorted. There's a little bit of unrest in rallying at the moment, with drivers not doing interviews after the first day, or I think after every stage, actually, throughout the rally of Kenya. And I think that's not just about the swearing thing. It's about uncertainty with the regulations and various other things. So I think that will be a step in the right direction, big time. So that's good. That's about it, really, apart from all you people out there. Thank you so much for your support. I hope you've enjoyed some of the videos we've done, and looking forward now to getting on with it in terms of questions and comments. There's lots in the chat room at the moment, so forgive me again if I don't get through everything. I don't know any other way other than to start at the top and try to end at the bottom, jumping up and down when there's a super chat. So I'll be doing my best. But here's the first one from Lou Sequoia. Hi, Lou. Thanks for this. Hi, Peter. Big thanks for being with us. Well, thank you. Will the 26 cars sound like vacuum cleaners? Vacuum cleaners, of course, were quite... The sound of vacuum cleaners in motor racing were actually quite cool when they were around. I mean, we're thinking of the turbines mainly. They were described as vacuum cleaner type noises. And of course, we had the Lotus 56 Indy cars, which transformed everything in Indy, from the high revving, well, not necessarily high revving, but the V8 Offies and Fords. Suddenly to go to the turbine was a major culture shift. But everybody loved it. It was just like this. And then we had the Lotus 56 Formula One version of that, which nobody really talked about very much because They just accepted that turbine was an interesting thing, and let's listen to it. But now we got a completely different thing, of course. We've got 50% electrification coming in 2026, and that means only 50% of the power, in effect, is going to be from an internal combustion engine. Talking to the engine engineers so far, they're all reasonably optimistic that they will sound not a lot different from where we are today. Maybe different pitches and hums and hues, but I think in general there's not a particularly scary prediction at the moment of where it's going to go. I mean, the worst scenario probably, well, it could be a great scenario actually, will be if the sound is terrible and they start to get some sort of artificial sound going on. And what would it be? Would it be a flat 12? Would it be an H16 BRM? Would it be a V16 BRM? You know, would it be something from would it be a 24-cylinder Fiat from 1908? Or, you know, it could be anything. I mean, let's get going with that. It'd be quite funny, wouldn't it? Watching Lewis going around in his Ferrari sounding like a BRM H16. No, but that won't happen, obviously. But I think probably not anyway. You never know these days. But in general, they're optimistic. I mean, I'm not an engineer. I don't know. Yeah, it is a worry. I agree. You know, but at the moment, touch wood. It's I'll better touch some wood. It's looking as if they're reasonably confident. But thanks for that. AB. Legend. Okay, I feel Oscar has that Aussies winning mentality like Ponting and War that Lando can never match. Even Max knows Oscar is the real threat for the future World Championship. Well, especially Max, I think. I mean, Max has probably known that for a long time, I would imagine. And it's, you know, I got to say, it's what I've been banging on about for the last, I don't know how long, that Lando's biggest issue in winning the World Championship is Oscar Piastri. I've been saying that very clearly on virtually every live stream and every video I've been doing for the last 12 months, despite a lot of the currency out there talking about Lando, easy domination at McLaren, his big threat is Max or Charles Leclerc or Lewis or George Russell, and has he got, you know, it was all that, wasn't it? And if you think about before Melbourne, all the talk was Lando's, you know, the odds-on favourite to win the World Championship. Nobody was talking about Oscar Piastri. Now everybody's talking about Oscar, of course, because he's leading the championship. Okay, all right, everybody makes mistakes, and now everybody's got the picture. And yeah, I totally agree with you. I made this point with Cameron on Monday that to me, it's not only an Aussie's winning mentality. There's a certain mentality of certain types of winning Aussies that Oscar, I think, has. And it's a certain calmness and overall impression and feeling of he's always going to deliver. He's always going to do it, regardless of the situation, with not a lot of histrionics and shouting and screaming and emotion. And that's a very rare thing. And that's why it's so difficult for Lando, apart from Oscar's sheer speed. It's a very difficult thing because it's like Jack Brabham, as I said it with Cameron, you know, Jack Brabham didn't say that much. He just got on with it. And he was quite monosyllabic. He had the odd dry Australian comment. Funny guy, but a difficult teammate to have, no doubt about that. And he was, you know, he delivered, didn't he? And I see Oscar in that sort of mode and that sort of realm. And I listed quite a few of the Australians that I would put in that bracket. Yeah, you've mentioned Steve Waugh, Ricky Ponting. I agree. I'd probably add Michael Clark to that, you know, and plenty of other Australians as well. Don Bradman, similar thing. I think it's not only there, you see it in all athletic ventures of Australia. Sometimes they are a bit histrionic and sometimes they are a bit wild and a bit emotional. But there's a lot of people who've got the sort of Steve Waugh, steely, don't say anything unless you really need to. And when you do say it, it's just going to be a one-liner that's going to sum everything up. And Oscar does that really well, doesn't he? You know, there's a guy who pulls out in front of him and he doesn't say, hey, did you see that? You know, he just says, oh, that was good. Yeah, good move, mate. Yeah, well done. Says it all, doesn't it? And, you know, I think he was very, very cool in the way he handled that turn one situation in Saudi Arabia. It was just like, there wasn't a rise in decibel. It was just like, yeah, well, you know, no way he was going to make the corner there, mate. Yeah. And obviously Max was going to defend his side of the ring. There's no doubt about that. But down the inside there, you know, it was all Oscar's corner by third gear. And sadly, you know, that's another subject, of course, going down that particular tangent, which is, I personally think the pole winner should be allowed to choose which side of the grid on which he wants to start. And it wouldn't be that difficult to do it. I know I'm going off at this tangent now, but all the FIA need to do is put boxes down both sides of the grid, and it's not difficult, particularly costly or time consuming to do that. And then you've got this great moment after qualifying when everybody's waiting to see which side of the grid the pole winner is going to choose. Pretty cool. He's got 30 seconds to choose. You can really, build it up. And it could even be a special award, the pole winning choice, and that brought to you by X. So as I say, I think that's something they should really pick up on. And interestingly, since I've done that video and made those comments, I've had a few, for about the 15th time, I've had quite a few engineers in touch saying, yeah, it's not a bad idea. Just wanted to see how I thought it would work in terms of the boxes on the grid and so forth. They said, yeah, that's quite simple. Yeah, we should do that. And so it's quite interesting. I'm not saying there's a real movement yet, but there might well be. So yeah, thank you for that question. I'm just looking across at my iPhone now, not my iPhone, whatever it is. Sorry, my Redmi Note. And I look incredibly red-faced there, but yet when I'm looking at myself in OBS here, I look unbelievably pale. Don't ask me why that is. If I'm looking red where you're watching, I'm not actually that color. Equally, if you're watching it and I look very pale, I'm a little bit less pale than you think. So the same question from AB, hey legend. I feel Oscar. Oh, it's the same question. Yeah, okay, we'll give that one. This is AB, good health. Good wishes, Peter from India. Big fan of your knowledge. Well, yeah, okay, thank you. I hope it's up to scratch. Don't think you. Big fan of your knowledge. Don't you think Red Bull doesn't turn up their engine mode till qualifying and hide their pace, unlike McLaren, which Lando also said? Well, I think they do. I think, yeah, but nobody else does. I mean, when you run a qualifying spec car, it is within the realms of what you can adjust. It is a qualifying spec car. And if there's a little bit more you can get out of the engine, you would do that. There's nothing new there. I think because Mercedes have, I don't know how many teams. They've got, what, Williams, McLaren, obviously the factory team. There's 3, isn't it? So, there's perhaps less scope, I guess, if you're a customer team to do quite as much. But yeah, we've seen Lando and Oscar find half a second between Q1 and Q3. So I know the track gets quicker. I don't think that's a particularly, yeah, I mean, yeah, and it would be my thing. He does. But then everything else gets quicker too. The car is the track is quicker, the car, possibly they do a few things with the front tabs that they wouldn't run in Q1, front, wing, and maybe brake ducts or something like that. You never know. And I think, yeah, they do a good job anyway. They could do a good job. I think the improvement that Red Bull made actually between Friday and Q3 was very much the engineers getting on top of the car and this ridiculously chronic problem that Max seemed to have in Bahrain, which is a little bit imprecise anyway, semi-braking, semi-understeer, semi-bouncing, semi-no grip. And they got on top of all that. And there was an engine braking thing as well, wasn't there, in Saudi Arabia? They got on top of it all. They didn't in Bahrain, but they did in Saudi Arabia. That was the impressive thing. And as I said, this is the without Adrian Newey now, they're very exposed to criticism and how their future is going to be. And to me, this was quite a good race for them in terms of their engineering team and depth of recovering from a bad previous Grand Prix, and then a week later a bad Friday, and then getting it together on Saturday and Sunday in a very impressive way. So I think that was good. Tinny K. Hi, Peter. I'd be interested in your insights on the relationship between tire grip, mechanical grip, and downforce. Can one be used to counter the lack of another? Well, I've got to tell you, there are 2 schools of thought here. One is the John Surtees school of thought, which is that when you've got a new racing car, you take all the wings off, take all the aero off, and you get it set up as a mechanical entity that handles well and has the grip level at whatever you've got from the car, and you balance it out, and then you put the wings on just to increase the downforce everywhere. It's kind of simplistic, but that's what John used to do. And then you've got the other end of the extreme. You've got Frank Durney, very highly qualified in terms of his experience and results in Formula One, but also university aerodynamicist, who says that there's no such thing as mechanical grip. It's all aerodynamic. And so, I don't know. All I would say is that most people today would say it is all aero. If you've got great downforce, efficient downforce, let me rephrase that. If you've got more aero downforce for less drag by a factor of, say, 5% compared with anybody else on the grid, it doesn't matter how bad your mechanical grip is, you're going to win the race. I think that's a truism. And so in that sense, aero is the boss. Aero is king. What was the other thing you mentioned? Mechanical grip, downforce, tire grip. Well, tire grip, yes, but because we're in a monopoly with Pirelli and everybody's on the same tires, it's a sort of given variable, isn't it? It's nothing that really, obviously a difference between a soft tire and a medium and a hard is important, and you can set the car up differently mechanically and aerodynamically to get the best from those tires. In the case of the medium, to get them to last as possible. In the case of the soft, to get the temperatures absolutely right just for one lap. And that is a question of getting the tire balanced by the aero. Mechanical grip there's obviously scope to play with that in terms of roll stiffness, in terms of Ackerman, toe-in, camber. You wouldn't include ride height in that, but of course it does involve mechanical components. And so mechanical grip and also tire pressures, I guess you could say, are part of mechanical grip as well. And there's still, within the realms of what you're recommended to be running, there is still a little bit room for playing around. So yeah, mechanical grip is there still, but it's got nothing like the same scope of adjustment as a 1970s Grand Prix car, even a 1980s Grand Prix car. So it's a different deal today in that sense. Aero is king. That's what I would say in general. And as I said, if you've got more efficient aero than anybody else, you're going to win the race. AB again, it seems Oscar is best matched on the grid to have a wheel-to-wheel battle with Max in a Max style. Leclerc and Lando too soft for Max. I'm not sure Max would agree with that about Leclerc. He might say that about poor old Lando. But Leclerc? No, I don't think so. I think we haven't seen a really good Max versus Leclerc in virtually the same car in terms of grip and balance and where they are on tyres for quite a while. But my feeling is that Leclerc will be giving Max, if he's ever in that situation, he'll be giving Max just as much as Max can give him. But getting back to Oscar, I think Oscar's a different sort of driver to Max. He's more of a classic racing driver in what is acceptable and what isn't. Whereas I think Max is more of a sort of, I don't know, he's more of a sort of karting, he will get past no matter what type driver. Whereas Oscar, I think there's a little bit of the Steve Waugh in that aspect of him as well. It's, it's got to be a classic move. And he did a great move, didn't he? I can't remember who it was. I think it was around the outside of somebody in a place I'd never seen anybody pass, even in Saudi Arabia. Yeah, I mean, he's very, very good. Very good. But I would say this, with all the euphoria now about Oscar leading the championship 99 points, is that he has longer corners than Max. He brakes later than Max in order to be able to maximize that wide approach to corners. And that showed up in Sector 1. That's why Max was always quicker in Sector 1 in Saudi Arabia, because there's more scope there just to do a little bit with shorter corners. I mean, I didn't go on about it. To me, Saudi Arabia is a bit of a lash up of a circuit, and we're talking about chicanes here and stop start, but even then, a good short corner driver in a car with good grip and balance will beat a good long corner driver. He's using less road for a start, but beyond that, this is the very important point. He has more scope to make small adjustments when things don't go quite right. When you go in a little bit too deep, as Lando did, or if you get the power on a fraction too soon, or we got a little bit too much understeer mid-corner, you've got much more scope if you're just playing around with the rotation area at a relatively slow minimum speed than if you are going in deep as you can, wide as you can, trying to get the power on as soon as you can. That is when, if you get it perfect, it's fine, as Ayrton Senna 99 times out of 100 did. But if you don't, you're going to have the incident that Lando had. And that's what, there's no margin for error there. And Oscar has, you see occasionally he runs a bit wide or this or that, and it's just a slight glitch. And that is where the difference was between Max and Oscar in Sector 1. If I said Sector 3, I meant Sector 1, sorry. Sector 1 in Saudi Arabia. And that's the difference. And so we should always remember that. You know, Max to me is driving at the absolute peak of how a human being can drive a Grand Prix car. I think Oscar is near the peak of how some human beings drive a Grand Prix car, but it's not as good as the Max system. And that needs to be borne in mind, I think. And that will show up when he's wheel to wheel with Max. If they're ever wheel to wheel in a proper race, maybe, you know, kind of as they could have been in Saudi Arabia, I guess, if it hadn't been the 5-second penalty, maybe, but it's not the right sort of circuit on which to make that call. But if they're ever in that situation, you know, it's going to be interesting because Max is going to be getting his pace from different areas. And as I said in the video I did about turn 27, you know, Max's speed differential over Oscar 50 meters out of the exit of 27 was extraordinary, given how slow he was mid-corner compared with Oscar. And and the Max system is always better in a wheel-to-wheel situation, as Nigel Mansell kind of proved against Piquet in 86 and 87. The number of times he passed Piquet, not necessarily the Silverstone 87 thing, I'm thinking more Ricard 86, when, you know, he just went inside going into the double right-hander. Piquet thought, wow, he's going inside there, I can't believe he's doing that sort of thing, and was a bit spooked by it. From Nigel's point of view, all he was doing was just taking it on the normal racing line. It wasn't anything special for him. That's the bit of road he always used. He knew exactly what the grip was there. And that will always be the case for Max versus Oscar. Max will know where the grip is in places where you can actually pass, whereas when Oscar needs to do a pass, 9 times out of 10, he's going to have to tread on little bits of road that he hasn't been using. That's the difference between a short and a long corner driver, generally. I mean, it's a big generalization. Obviously, every circuit is slightly different, but, well, quite different, but that is the difference. Mark Vandermeer. Hi, Peter. How was Verstappen going off track this Sunday any different to Hamilton going off track at Abu Dhabi 21? I don't see why Hamilton got away with that then, and then Max didn't now. Yeah, I mean, different race directors, different race people, you know, everything's different. I mean, the same thought crossed my mind, and I just thought, no, I don't want to go down that path because, you know, it was different then, wasn't it? For one thing, Jonathan Wheatley's not at Red Bull anymore. So, yeah, you know, I'm not sure precedent means anything when it comes to incidents in Formula One these days. I mean, it was interesting, wasn't it? I thought one of the most interesting things was that Liam Lawson got a 10-second penalty for going off track and gaining an advantage. And Max got a 5-second penalty, going off track, gaining an advantage. Interesting. Probably correct, you know, probably a much bigger advantage in Liam's case. Or was anybody watching? No, I don't know. Snoopy, you got me worried now. You're saying, when is this starting? I think it started, Snoopy. Snoopy. Oh, yes. It says 15 hours. Oh, okay. Well, we're at midday plus 28 minutes in CET, which is Central European time. Well, I think it's working. I'm still looking at my phone. It seems to be there live. I hope it's working. Here's the first of the super chats. Thank you very much indeed from Schlosser. Thank you. Hey, Peter, apologies if this has been covered before. I'd like to know how you watch each race. Is it with Formula One TV, driver onboards, just the broadcast, etc.? Well, I do have access to some footage, to some feeds that aren't normally, that I don't think go out to the public. So I have that, and I have some data, quite a lot of data coming in, telemetry, and in the background I have the world feed muted, so I don't listen to any of the commentary. And yeah, quite lucky there really to have that through friends at F1 and FOM, having worked for them for quite a lot over the years, so that's nice. So yeah, interesting. Thank you for that question. Another super chat here. Ayman Ramal. Where does the safety car go after the race start? Yeah, well, after the race start, you're talking about the race start as distinct from a restart. Let's think about that. After the race start, I think don't Doesn't he race around behind the field and then come into the pits behind them? I think that's what happens, isn't it, or not? They have to be pretty careful that somebody isn't catching him, of course. But I think most circuits, they can get away with that. When they can't, they obviously come in beforehand, don't they? Before the end of the lap, and have a route plotted out. It's a good question, actually. I haven't really thought about that. I think that's what happens. I think it actually can do the lap before the field come round for the second time. Yeah. I'll get back to you on that one. Thank you for that question. Always good to learn some stuff, isn't it? Use one's brain and think about what things we haven't thought about. So going back to Marina Nora Rodriguez Ruiz from Argentina. Hi there. And condolences for the sad passing of the Pope over the Easter period. Amazing that he was out there on the balcony, wasn't it? And then the next day he left us. But he was from Argentina, I think, wasn't he? Hi, Peter from Argentina. Hope you're doing well. Why do you think Lando keeps talking down their car while Oscar says there's no point denying it's the fastest? Well, that's because Oscar's a Steve Waugh laid-back Australian who, you know, it's an obvious point. You know, why wouldn't you want to give credit to the engineers and everybody in the team who've produced a rocket ship if you're benefiting from this rocket ship? Of course, it's a logical thing. And for Lando not to be saying that, he's just completely psyched out about Max, isn't he? Because every time Lando says, well, it's not a rocket ship, you know, and if Max Verstappen drove this car, I think he'd be really shocked at what it's like. I mean, what's he saying then about his teammate, Oscar Piastri, who's blowing him away? You know, all he's saying then is saying, oh, yeah, and Oscar's obviously huge, massively quicker than me as well. I mean, it's just a ridiculously... Again, it just comes to the heading of Lando is completely lost in the head, I think, at the moment, because that is a ludicrous thing to say. And it's also pretty ludicrous from the point of view that if Max did drive a McLaren, I think most of us agree that he'd be pretty quick in the car, would he not? But even putting that to one side, because there is a question mark there, I guess, you have to handle that. It's a ridiculous thing to say. And it's not the sort of thing, it's in the idiom of an Australian classic sportsman of the type I've just been speaking. And Oscar is one of those. You know, it is a quick car, period. You know, and of course it's a quick car. And it's ridiculous to deny it. So that just shows that Lando's, as I predicted, really suffering under the pressure of Oscar, having to look at the other side of the garage all the time, rather than focusing on what he does well and get on with it. And hopefully he's got a little bit of a break now, and it might clear his mind. But I've been saying that for a long time. I presume others are saying it around him, and you know, he needs to get off his social media. He needs to stop having to adopt another persona, which is the Lando Norris interviewee. I'm saying this, I'm saying that. How should I present myself? Or get rid of all that and just become a race driver. And he can do it. He can still do it because that's what he was initially. But he's lost at the moment. Marina Nora Rodriguez. AB doesn't remember the amazing wheel-to-wheel battles between Max and Charles in 22. They were beautiful to watch. Yeah, you're right. You know, it's been a while, and I think Charles is more polished now in every dimension, wheel-to-wheel racing as well, as Max is. So, you know, I don't think Max would in any way discount Charles Leclerc as a serious racing driver that you'd need to pay attention if he was alongside him. Hey, Peter, this is AB again. Do you remember the 2021 Jeddah start when Max lost at the start, still went on hot into turn one, nearly took Hamilton off? At the same point, Max has to start conceding corner. Yeah, as I say, at different times. And you know, that was Michael Massey, and that was as race director. And then we saw what happened in Abu Dhabi, and it was Jonathan Wheatley at Red Bull fighting for Max, and it was a different Mercedes probably as well. No, it was probably about the same, really, a bit wishy-washy. But yeah, different people, different times, and a lot of pressure on Formula One and Liberty at that time because they were the two championship contenders in the penultimate race. I think, was it the penultimate race? Pretty near. So yeah, it was it's difficult to compare them now, sadly. They should have precedence, I agree. Alessandra Durango. Hi, Peter. Lots of talk about the difference between Lewis and Charles' driving style and if that can compromise the development of the car. What is your feeling about that? Well, there's a massive difference in style now. I always thought Lewis would relax and become very much the driver that he was prior to 22. Now that he's at Ferrari, enjoying life, finally knows where his career is going to go in the last couple of years, enjoying everything that comes with being a Ferrari driver, and obviously having a pretty good race car underneath him most of the time. But he hasn't. He's still the driver that he was in the unfortunate, uncomfortable Mercedes years from 22 to 24. And so that's one thing, and that's the big difference in style. Lewis is in a weird sort of style of late braking, long braking in a straight line, trying to get the power on soon, sort of Oscar Piastri type style, but not on the edge that Oscar's routinely adopting, because Lewis is not confident. He wasn't confident with the Mercedes, with the instability at the rear, and he's got no more stability at the rear on the Ferrari, it would appear, from what he says. And so he's not confident there either. So it's not working for him. And when he says that, I mean, I question what he's actually saying, because what is he saying? That the instability was better at Mercedes because he's pointing it out on the Ferrari? Or is he saying he's really disappointed that the Ferrari hasn't got a much better rear? But why would he be disappointed? Because the Ferrari quite clearly hasn't had a lot of stability at the rear for the last 4 or 5 years. So why did he think it was going to change overnight anyway? So that's the different style. Then you're asking me, is that a problem for the development of the car? And in theory, it's not a problem, because in reality, what you want are two different styles of driver. So you've got as much information coming in from the two of them that you can condense into something that makes sense. Obviously, if one is much quicker than the other, as Charles is at the moment, then you're always going to go down the route of Charles Leclerc and what he thinks is the next thing they need to work on for the car. But in general, having two different styles of driver, like Mansell and Piquet at Williams, very good example, or Prost and Senna in '88, another very good example, is a good thing. And indeed, that was to some extent where Lewis was with Valtteri Bottas. He was pretty good on his day, but he was generally a bit wider and asked more of the rear than Lewis was. And that was a pretty good development program for them. But if you take, say, Carlos Sainz and Alex Albon at Williams, they're both quite late turn-in, driving on the rear sort of drivers. And if you've got a car that works for them, that's great. But what they're not getting is the input that somebody like Max or Charles would give them if they really wanted to see how the front was working on that car. So I don't think it'll hurt Ferrari per se. It's pretty clear at the moment what direction they're going to go in with the car. It's going to be Charles' direction, isn't it? Because he's the guy that's using the front end. He's not complaining as much as Lewis about the rear. He's using his very, very good balance and control and management of the front of the car to be able to contain the rear. He's using whatever he's got from the rear, as little as it is, to help him with the front. And it takes him a while, takes him most of Fridays to get on top of that on any given circuit. But when he's got there, he's found that sweet spot. But it's a fairly narrow sweet spot, which I think speaks volumes to how well Charles is driving, because he's got a very narrow ribbon on which he can operate, and he's still delivering over a full race distance. I mean, look at the 8th disqualified 4.43 in the last 3 races. That's very impressive, isn't it? Very impressive. So, yeah. Sarosh Soman, hi Peter. Hamilton is unable to manipulate the car like turn-in with brakes and short corner entries. Is it a force of habit that he's not able to get back to short corner driving from 22 onwards? Force of habit, it's a force of habit, yes. It's also lack of confidence and shock at how quick Charles Leclerc is, and a bit sort of confused as to what to do next. And as I said I think in a previous live stream, the previous one to this actually, that I think the other factor which we should always bear in mind, which I always have borne in mind whenever I've said, I think Lewis is going to really enjoy Ferrari. He's not going to win world championships there if it's a championship winning car, because that's going to be Charles Leclerc, but he will win a race or two, and he will relax in these last few years of his life, and it's a great way, his career. And it's a great way for him to sign off from Formula One. Red overalls, pasta, F40s, whatever you want to do. But I think the qualification for that is that he's 40 years old. And if it's not a question of reflexes, of eyesight, of bravery, or anything like that. When you're 40, you think more about things than you do if you're 21, particularly if there's a choice to be made on the edge of something. And you think more about, well, the downside is if I lose it here and I'm going, I don't want to hit that curb. You just think a little bit more about everything you're doing. And so that in turn takes away the gut instinct feel of just getting out there and driving the race car. And that's what I think Lewis doesn't have. He may get it back. He may get it back if he relaxes and he just enjoys his life at Ferrari and doesn't worry about things too much. And a bit like Lando, signs off from all the interviews. You don't want to have to keep answering questions about this. So that's what he needs to do, in my opinion. And that's what I always thought he would do, actually. I thought he would do no interviews. I thought his contract with Ferrari would say, no interviews. He doesn't need to do any interviews. Why? Everybody knows about Lewis Hamilton now. And he can do stuff with the sponsors, obviously, but, nothing else. But just enjoy it and relax. And if he does, he might well get that back again. But even then, he'll still have that thing that he will be thinking more than he needs to. And Charles doesn't think about things very much. They're purely instinctive because he's just got that razor sharp gut feeling way of going motor racing, like Oscar, like Max, not like Lando at the moment, but let's hope Lando gets it back, like George Russell. And I mean, right now, I'd say Kimi Antonelli is probably thinking a little bit too much. He drove very well in the race, didn't he? He recovered well and did well. But I still think he's got an issue with fast corners compared with how good he is on slow corners. And that showed up in Saudi Arabia. And the question is whether he thinks that or whether he's just going to let that sort of settle in and in time, in a couple of races, he'll be right there on quick corners too. I guess the really interesting test for Antonelli will be Silverstone, on the quick corners at Silverstone, how he compares with George there, if he's got it together by then. Because I've no doubt that through the twiddly bits at Silverstone, he'll be as quick as George, as he has been already in some other circuits. So anyway, it is a force of habit for Lewis. It's also lack of confidence. And it's also thinking about things too much, in my opinion. Another one from Sarosh. We need to get some different questioners coming in soon. Senna out-qualified Prost by 1.5 seconds, Monaco 88. In 90, Mansell out-qualified Prost 1 second at Silverstone. Nobody ever talks about Mansell's performance. I can't even find a video of that lap. Well, I've got a video, but it's in my mind. I remember that lap absolutely as if it was yesterday. It was one of the best laps Nigel ever drove. And thanks for mentioning that. You're right. That was Prost in a very good Ferrari. By then, Enrique Scalabroni had done a great job developing that John Barnard car, which had finished the 89 season in midfield, sort of Australian Grand Prix, difficult car. But by 90, it was amazing. And yeah, it was just one of the best laps Nigel ever drove. Superb. Of course, he didn't finish the race. It was the famous race when he threw the helmet down or threw into the crowd or whatever and said, I'm out of here. Because he was convinced that Ferrari were favouring Prost with more reliability as well. And as close as I am to Nigel, and much as I love him, I mean, I don't think that was the case. I think it was a bit like how he was at Williams in 91, when if there was an electronic problem on the car, it was always his car, not Riccardo Patresi's. And it was just the way it happened. But Nigel was, because he's such a racing driver, and a bit like Max with the whole thing at Turn 1 in Saudi Arabia at the weekend, wasn't me, it has to be Oscar's fault, he would have taken me out. Yeah, that's how racing drivers are supposed to think. And that's what Lando Norris actually should be thinking and saying about Oscar Piastri. He should be getting fired up about this instead of, having a go at Max Verstappen, which is what he seems to be doing. It's ludicrous. You've got the teammate is the guy you got to beat. That's the guy that gets under your skin. And if you're not feeling that, then there's something wrong with you. AB again, Peter, I don't think Horner tarnishes his reputation. Don't you think Horner tarnishes his reputation and Red Bull's by sticking and backing Max, no matter what Max does, just so that Max is happy? Well, you say that. I thought he did quite a good job of calming Max. I don't know whether it was his voice or not, but presumably he endorsed everything that was going out, which was, we all have our own opinions, Max. Let's get on with it. Go racing. And I thought that was pretty good, because if he was what you were saying, which he's always sticking and backing Max, he would have been on the radio revving Max up, saying, that was unjust. We're going down to the stewards now. We're fighting this, Max. There's no way. He would have been doing all that, but he didn't. He was very calm about it. Excuse me. And I thought that was very good. Pergamino. Lovely. So, yeah. I think he does quite a good job, Christian Horner, actually. A very good job, actually. And I think He's got his team there post Adrian Newey, and they're not doing a bad job, are they? They're coming together pretty well. I mean, if you're basing it on something Christian may well say after the race, some interview, don't base a decision, don't base your judgment on that, because usually it's nonsensical questions and unnecessary answers. Just judging on what is going on during the race. And during the race, within about a minute of that incident happening, Red Bull were saying to Max, get on with it, or knowing about the 5-second penalty anyway, get on with it, don't talk about it. And that's right. So that was the key moment, and I thought they did very well. So Rush again, hi Peter, I thought that Leclerc drove as well as Verstappen in Bahrain and Saudi. For me, the drive in Med in the opening stint in Bahrain was unbelievable on mediums, able to keep pace with everyone on soft tyres. Yeah. I mean, there's always a big thing about, it doesn't happen very often, does it? That everyone starts on softs, and then Ferrari are on medium. I'm not sure they planned it that way. I imagine they just didn't really think laterally, and they just thought everyone will be on mediums as normal. Woo, everyone's on softs, what do we do here? But you're right, he was there or thereabouts, wasn't he? It didn't help him off the line, though. He lost a couple of places off the line, which was a shame. And I still think that had Ferrari been on the right strategy, because they had enough, with McLaren, they were the only team that actually had enough mediums to do that strategy, 2 new sets, and they could have won. They could have had a very good race, but they didn't. They didn't actually maximize their mediums, and I think when the safety car then came into play, yeah, I mean, he's very good, very good, and there's a lot to be said in Formula One for being on a harder tire off the line, because generally the race pace is relatively slow. Depends who's leading and what's going on. But if Max is leading, he tends never to pull away, does he? It's always 1/10 here, 1/10 there. It's by lap 19 he's plus 0.2, 0.7. I mean, Jim Clark used to be lap 19, he'd be 25 seconds in front. But not with Max, and probably the same with McLaren, because they're so nervous about keeping the car and the tyres in one piece. So there's a lot to be said in upcoming races if there's a choice, a very fine balance between soft or medium. And bear in mind, Pirelli were not even thinking that anyone would start on mediums in Bahrain. It wasn't even on their, they did 5 potential strategies, and that wasn't even on any of those 5. So I think it was a mistake, to be honest. Not a mistake, but I think had they known, they would have started on softs. But he did a good job. There's no doubt Charles is very good. I've been saying that for years. I remember, I don't know why I remember this, but it was when I used to do those videos up and down the steps when I was in England during COVID. And I remember then doing a thing about, and one of those I was saying, for me, Charles Leclerc is right up there with Max and Lewis as one of the great Grand Prix drivers of this era. For short corners, incredibly precise, very, very soft inputs. And I remember getting some feedback from a viewer saying, what a load of old nonsense. Charles Leclerc is never, ever going to be in the same bracket as Hamilton and Verstappen. And I just thought, wow, have they been watching what's going on? And it was clear to me long ago, Formula 3, Formula 2, how good Charles Leclerc is. And he's driving, what you're seeing Charles Leclerc doing is what Max does when he's not in a race-winning car. He's driving that well. Beautiful. Ikeni Okiwi. Hi, Peter. Do you think Formula One can put those huge sausage curbs on the outside of Turn 1 to prevent such incidents as like in Saudi, or Alonso just goes straight as he wishes at other tracks? I'm not sure sausage curbs are the answer. I'm still nervous about sausage curbs ever since the Alex Peroni incident at Monza, when it basically just pitched the car into the sky and he hit the top of the guardrail upside down. And of course, it depends what angle you hit the sausage curb. But whenever I see that word sausage curb, I tend to sort of duck and run for cover, to be honest. No, you just need to have a few concrete walls there, don't you? That would solve the problem. I mean, when this whole business of track limits came into Formula One, I think it was still, Vettel was still in Red Bull era, wasn't it? It was that sort of time. And I remember Rob Wilson saying, what are they doing? They just need to put a fence up there, put a wall there, it'll stop them. And he's got a point. If there was a big concrete wall, if there were the same walls as they got on the other side of Saudi Arabia, Jeddah, Corniche circuit, 6 gear S's with nowhere to go. If they had that, it would be a different first corner, wouldn't it? Well, but if they had that, I can tell you what would have happened. Max would have had to have filtered in behind Oscar. That's what would have had to happen. No question about it. And So, but of course, you always want safety to improve, not go backwards. So they'll never have a wall in case somebody hits it. And that's that. But, you know, it is, you have to think about the racetrack is the racetrack. And it comes down to the whole Kimi Raikkonen thing, being the only driver ever to have beaten Rob Wilson over one lap of Bruntingthorpe. But as Rob points out, he knocked over a cone when he did that. And I said, well, that's only a cone. Yeah, but it's the racetrack. He put a wheel off the track. No way, that lap didn't count. Kimi, of course, says it didn't count. It did count, and that the cone was incorrectly positioned or something, I think was his argument, something like that. Or he didn't say it in those words. It was the cone is wrong place or something like that. So maybe we should have cones on the outside of turn 1 in Saudi Arabia. But you're right about Alonso, you know. But where he is on the grid, you know, when in doubt, go down the outside in the first corner is Fernando's thing. Always has been. I mean, it's at the front row, he'd be a little bit more circumspect, I think. But I think he just loves being, if he's midfield or no. And by the way, Fernando Alonso, 0 points. What is going on? Adrian Newey, please advise. Everyone's going to say, Lance Stroll, 10 points. Fernando Alonso, 0. It's not doing a lot for his case of racing for the next 5 years to enjoy the Adrian Newey car, is it? I know it's all bad luck and he's incredibly good, and he is good. He's very good. But right now, where he is, I'm sure he's just thinking, right, outside here, outside there. Same questioner, Okiwi, or perhaps bollards marshals can remove before the cars get back to turn 1. Yeah, right. I'm not sure they'd find all the bollards that quickly, would they? They'd be all over the place. Sema Dragon, hello, Peter. Hola, hola. ¿Qué tal? Prane Shama. Hi, Peter. Not an F1 question, but who's your favourite tennis player of all time? Have you seen Alcaraz play? Not only have I seen, well, I've seen Alcaraz play golf, actually. He plays golf at my golf course right here, my local course. He was out here the other day with his buggy, the old thumbs up. Good man. I haven't actually seen him play tennis, no. Wow. I think Borg is my all-time favourite, to be honest. I love watching Bjorn Borg. I never understood how he was able to do those topspin forehands that way and so mechanically, but so beautiful. And I remember talking to James Hunt, who was good enough to play at Junior Wimbledon. I remember talking to him about tennis at one point, and he said, I can't remember, but I think it was the third Wimbledon Borg won against, it was definitely against McEnroe, but anyway, James Hunt said to me, he said, when Borg served out the 5th set with 4 aces, I think, he said it was the best 2 or 3 minutes of sporting achievement he'd ever seen in his life. And for James Hunt to say that, I thought was quite impressive. And I was always a Borg fan. I always wanted to beat McEnroe. And I love the feeler thing and the headband. And I met him a few times after, and relatively recently. Met him at Monaco, had a good chat to him. Lovely guy. A bit lost, I think, but what an athlete. One of them, so I think Borg, and let me think of some others I can throw. I like Pat Rafter too. Huge Pat Rafter fan. All right, thank you for that. I love questions like that. Sujith. Hey Peter, Lewis's buddy Robert Kubica welcomed Lewis to the Ferrari family officially. When asked in the 6 Hours of Imola grid, said he would love to do Le Mans with Lewis in a Ferrari. Yeah, that's what Lewis needs to do. Enjoy the whole Ferrari family. Definitely. Should be doing all that sort of stuff. He and Robert doing Le Mans, what a mega thing. And, you know, a few classic races as well. Get a nice 250 GTO and go and do classic Targa Florio or something. Yeah, of course he should. Brilliant. And he's right. You know, Robert's right. What a top man he is too. Pratik Barol. Hi, Peter. Always a good day when you do live streams. Well, thank you very much. Hope it's all working out okay. Can you talk a bit about race direction and stewardship before, during, and after Charlie Whiting? Well, that's a big subject, Pratik. So all I would say is that Charlie was a Bernie man foremost, and he worked for Bernie at Brabham as chief mechanic. On, you know, if you look at this, you look at the '83 Nelson Piquet World Championship win, it was, a lot of that was Charlie Whiting and the mechanics and the refueling and everything else that came in that they did so well. And when Bernie basically took over World Motorsport with Max in as FIA president and everything else, he just put in his key guys into the key slots and created jobs, really. I mean, the job as race director, it used to be clerk of the course, wasn't it? It was always an FIA local circuit thing for a long time. But then Charlie was the man, and I don't know. I mean, to me, there were always quite a lot of question marks about that and why all the scrutineering, weighing equipment was always kept at Bernie's factory in Chessington between races. You know, there was a lot going on, and I think there were a few things that happened which were for the good of the sport, probably the good of the business of the sport, that Ferrari should be able to win a few races or whatever was going on. But Charlie in general, you know, had a mechanic's mind, in my view, like Herbie Blash, who's very close to Charlie. Good mechanics, like Jonathan Wheatley's another example, Kenny Handkammer. Those guys have great racing brains, and they think in very precise detail about really important points. And Charlie was exactly that sort of person. He would never get flustered, and he would see it from a logical point of view. And so he was unique, and you'd never find another Charlie, in my opinion, partly because of his relationship with Bernie and Herbie anyway. And then we tried to replace him, you know, and the whole, I think we've tried to make the race director more important than we can now, because we can never have that situation again. And now we've given probably too much. I think in the Michael Massey period, we gave too much control to one individual. And now I think the FIA are doing a better job of predicting potential dramas and knowing how to react to them. It's a bit more of a committee-driven program. And I think the teams have got quite a lot of input now on how things should be run and how they're governed. And I don't think any of them are really happy with the situation. They never are. But I think it's definitely better than it was in 2021. And there's more scope for, not for compromise, but for adjusting things and getting them right. So yeah, difficult job. And difficult because the whole Charlie, Bernie, Herbie thing was so powerful and so omnipresent. And as I say, you'll never replace that. Let's go back to some super chats now. This is Perpetually Biased. There you go, that's a great name. Hi, Peter. Dennis Jenkinson would love that name. Hi, Peter. Good morning from Detroit. Good morning to you. One of my favourite places, well, favourite Grand Prix anyway, the Detroit Grand Prix and the old Rensen there. You've mentioned you don't like the bank changes made at Zandvoort. Why not? Don't they provide more opportunities in various racing lines? Thank you. No, I think on the contrary, well, I mean, you can go high or low, but I mean, it's just constant radius, isn't it? It's nothing, it's just like any banking. You can go high or low or medium. No, I think that was a great corner because it was, as you were coming out of that quick right-hander, you then had a very short straight, and then you had an important corner with a long straight afterwards, or longish straight, and camber changes going into the corner. So there were a lot of dynamic movements that the driver had to manage, dynamic forces there. Now it's just like, whoom, whoom, you know, it's just, what's the point of it? I just don't get it. Sorry. If you want bank corners, build an oval. I don't get what this bank corner thing is all about. And that's one. And then the other one is coming onto the main straight. I mean, the corner before that they replaced it with was a really quick, flat, you know, as in sea level, right-hander that was really difficult. And if you were good through there, you picked up a lot of speed down the straight over your opposition. And again, I think that's gone away. It's basically, I mean, I think you'll find that a Gabriel Bortoletto doing his simulation before the race with exactly the setup they're going to have in terms of aero will know exactly what he's going to do through that corner and when he's going to get power on full, probably full all the way, I don't know, depends on DRS. And that's it. Whereas before, there's no way you could have got that corner right on a simulator. There was too much going on. It was a really quick corner. But that was all part of making the corner, the circuit, shorter and fitting it into a smaller space, and just getting that bank corner. It looks spectacular, but I don't think it does very much in terms of driving skill. But that's my opinion. Thank you. Perpetually Biased. Probably think I'm perpetually biased. Pratik Barol, how good are the Pirelli tyres now that some drivers this year are not even trying out the hards before using them in the race? Is the tyres' baseline performance so good that this is feasible? Well, I think in terms of, I think in one aspect there you're completely right, which is, and I keep saying this, hats off to Pirelli for the job they're doing, how quick these cars are, and how few, touch wood now, bang, bang, relatively few tyre failures we've had in the last, 12 months, or May to May now. It's been very impressive. And that's, Pirelli should be applauded for that. That's why I always try and go out of my way to give Pirelli as much publicity as I can, because I just think they're doing a very good job for Formula One. They're very different from a lot of the big sponsors in there with circuit signage who are just sort of buying space. Pirelli are a real company, and they, in Formula One terms, and they do a great job. I think in terms of, what the tyre does and how it performs over a stint, the tyres are still very difficult. And most Grand Prix drivers, if you have them away from the racetrack, away from microphones, and you're chatting on the beach or whatever, they're all going to say, the tyres, it's just hopeless, whatever they're going to say. That's no disrespect to Pirelli. It's just the situation they're in. They don't need to do anything more than they're doing. And they've got a lot of pressure always from the fans, from the FIA, from F1, to try to make the racing as dramatic as possible and to produce tyres that do suddenly fall off the cliff and suddenly bring about a change in race leader and a pit stop that wasn't predicted. That's what Pirelli are told to do, to build tyres around those parameters. And I think that's kind of sad, because I love to see perfection in every area of technology in Formula One. But there we are. We're using tyres to try to make racing more dramatic. And in that sense, there's another factor, of course, which is the number of tyre sets that each team has going into a race meeting, and what they think from quite early on is going to be an important tyre in the race is the tyre they then try not to use on a Friday too much or on a Saturday. And that's why you see them saving tyres. And the teams, I think, get to know what the other teams have got in terms of allocation on Sunday morning, and they can get a feel for it, because they'll always have spotters watching what the other teams are doing going out of the pit lane anyway. And quite quickly, everybody sort of realizes that the medium's going to be quite a good tyre, so you want to have 2 new sets of that, so we better do a longer run. We're going to do a fuel run on the hard, which will be okay, but we're going to have to sort of work out what it would be if we were on the medium, and so forth. So, yeah, it's quite good. I mean, in that sense, it's all interesting stuff. It's just not at the perfection level of the envelope, because it's all to do with when does the tyre fall off the cliff. And, as I say, I think overall they're doing a very good job. Patrick Barol, which WRC events are you looking forward to attending this year? Well, a lot of it is dictated by the school holidays, because if I went to a WRC event without Jack Windsor, I don't think I'd ever hear the end of it. I wouldn't. I wouldn't even get away. He'd let the air out of the tyres or something like that. I don't know. It wouldn't happen. So at the moment we're contemplating maybe a quick weekend dash to Sardinia, which is not in the holidays, because we just love to go to Sardinia. If not, it's going to have to be, it's going to, for sure, the Rally of Finland, and is it Estonia, I think, before that? Do those 2 there in the holidays. Maybe Portugal will be another weekend trip as well. But so it's a bit frustrating that the Rally of the Canarias is this week and not last week when we had the Easter holidays, because we would have been over there for sure, but not. Anyway, also looking forward to going to some other events as well. I mean, that's the great thing about rallying, that, if I could only get to 2 Formula One races, I'd think, my favorite drivers, I get to see them there. But then I could, if in a perfect world, as it used to be, you'd think, but Charles Leclerc's driving that Ferrari Le Mans car at Imola, and then there's Max Verstappen's going to do that touring car race in Zandvoort, and of course George Russell will be doing that round of the BTCC. I'm going to go to all those and watch those guys driving there. Of course, you can't do that anymore. You can in rallying, because guys like Neuville and Formo do local events as well, and if you keep on top of it, you can get to see these guys in those local events as well, which is brilliant. It's another, I say, great thing about rallying, and they haven't gone on that path of exclusivity. Noah Simao, Hi, Peter. With current testing limitations, do you think it would help Lewis to get out on track in a decent road car just to reconnect with his feel for short corners again? Or is that too simple? No, it's not. It's not too simple. And I think Rob Wilson has proved conclusively that you can improve a lot if you use a road car correctly. We're talking has to be manual transmission, has to be nothing too quick, has to be something that'll last for 2 or 3 days and not blow up after half an hour, has to be something that in which you can talk. And you have to have somebody good alongside you, like a Rob Wilson, to be able to say, no, that felt good, but it wasn't right. You know, it was too much of a jolt here, or you came out of the brake pedal a little bit too abruptly there. And it's very easy, even for a Lewis. I mean, that's why in other sports you always have trained coaches, whether it be tennis, golf, football, wherever, telling the pros what little bad habits they've fallen into, and they realize it and change. Look at Justin Thomas. I mean, he hadn't won, I don't know, it's about 3 years, he hasn't won a tournament. Suddenly he wins in the Heritage, the Arnold Palmer Heritage at the weekend. That's because he's just worked really hard with his father and other coaches as well. His swing coach, chipping coach, putting coach. They all have these coaches. In Formula One, the coaches are basically the race engineers reading out the telemetry to them and saying, oh, yeah, he's a bit quicker in the middle of the corner. I'll tell my driver to go a bit quicker too. It's not going to help somebody like Lewis. He's got to be in a situation where he's got a guy like Rob Wilson who knows what he's doing and watching and feeling and seeing, tapping him on the shoulder and saying, no, that's wrong. Let's sit down. Let's talk about this. And it needs to be somebody who's also got the bravery, is that the right word? You know, who's definitely got the confidence to be able to do that with a driver like Lewis, because a lot of people would think, well, 7 times world champion, how can I tell him what to do? But quite clearly, he does need to be told what to do, or certainly whether he'd find it on his own, I very much doubt it. I think he would just go and do what he does. I think. I may be wrong. He's very self-critical, but I don't think he's detailed enough. I don't think he's ever understood how he drives. I don't think it's a bad thing. I don't think Max really understands how he drives. I don't think the great drivers do. They just do it. And I think that's the problem in a way when you get to where Lewis is. He doesn't actually know what he's doing differently. He probably feels the same for him as it always has in terms of how he drives the car, how he brakes, how he turns in. He doesn't realize that he's doing these things. Maybe I'm the only person out there saying that. I don't know, saying that he's turning in later now. I know Mark Hughes has said he's always turned in later than most other drivers. I don't agree with that. I think up to 21, compared with all his teammates, he was always turning in a lot earlier. Compared with Max even, he was right there where Max was. And it all changed when the car became a difficult car. And also when he had George Russell to have to worry about in the other car as well, obviously. And so I don't think it would be very easy for him just to get in a road car and drive laps and laps of Mugello and start to realize what he's been doing wrong. I think he'd just go around and have fun, and that would be it. Scroopy Noobs. Hi, sir. Peter Donington Windsor. Oh, okay. If you were ahead at McLaren, it's David actually, but thank you. That's not a bad name, is it, Donington? If you were ahead at McLaren, at which point would you lessen the mental load on Lando and make him an unofficial number 2? It would seem that given Oscar's mental, that he would have a far easier time of it leading a championship and fighting off Max, who seems to hold some kind of mental edge over Lando. Well, I said very cynically, I suppose, chatting to Cameron on Monday, that we're all waiting with bated breath to see what Zak Brown's big master plan is for handling these two guys as the championship develops. And of course, I'm being cynical because I'm sure Zak doesn't have a master plan any more than anybody else at McLaren does. And I was chatting to a race engineer about this yesterday, actually, because they were giving me a hard time about it, saying, you can't give McLaren a hard time for choosing the best 2 drivers they could get, and Oscar's out there doing a great job. And I've never said that he isn't quick or wouldn't do a great job. All I've ever said was, if you've got Lando Norris, and his family have plowed a lot of money into his career, all of which McLaren have managed and controlled extremely well, and then you've got Lando winning Grand Prix and feeling over that he's the driver, then you don't go and get rid of Daniel Ricciardo and put Oscar Piastri in the other car. You're happy with what you've got and you make it work. Now, if they then, I mean, did they hire Oscar Piastri? Because it was clear to anybody with a brain, I think, a racing brain, when the minute they hired Oscar Piastri, that he was going to be at least as quick, if not quicker than Lando Norris. He's that good. It's clear from day one. That's why I've always said that. The guy's really quick. He's much quicker than Daniel Ricciardo. And so when they made that decision, did they make that decision because they'd come to their own conclusion that Lando was never going to be good enough to win a world championship, regardless of how good a car they gave him? I doubt it, because I think Zach loves Lando like a son almost, another son. I think he's really close to Lando and would love to see him win the world championship. In which case, he's made a massive mistake, because signing Oscar Piastri was about the worst thing he could have done to help Lando win a world championship. That is my point, and that is what I keep saying. And a lot of people take little bits of that out of context and get it wrong. But that is my point. And so I have no idea. I mean, I would never have got myself in the position in which Zach finds himself, because I would never have hired Oscar Piastri. Or I would have said to Lando then, sorry, mate, you're number 2. You can stay if you like, or you're out. But our number 1 guy is going to be Oscar, because quite clearly he is a megastar. I'm not sure I would have had the bravery to say that to Lando, even if I felt it. So they didn't, they wouldn't have done that. I would have kept Daniel Ricciardo, and I think Lando would have had, what's he had? He said a first, a second, a third, and a fourth. I think he would have had at least 2, if not 3 wins if he'd had Daniel Ricciardo in the other car now. I think he would have won, and I think he would be a much better bet for the world championship if Daniel Ricciardo had stayed at McLaren. But because it is what it is, I don't think Zach will ever step in. And Zach, he's so close to Lando. I can't imagine he would ever say to Lando, sorry, mate, you're going to have to do all you can to help Oscar now. If ever you're in front of him on track, you're going to have to let him past. And we want all the points to go to Oscar, because we've got a big battle going on with Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen. I can't imagine him saying that. Maybe 2 races to go, but not now. Never. And that's the problem they've got. And that's why Max is, Max is just picking up points when he can. And the fact that it's not all going to one McLaren driver is a very, very good thing from his point of view. Starting to look that way a bit with Oscar, isn't it? But at the moment, so Seema Dragon is just telling me that everything's good with the audio and with the picture. Can't believe it. Anyway, that's good news. Thank you. So where are we now? We've been going since over an hour already. It's only come down. It feels like 10 minutes. Isn't it great when you're having fun? If I don't, again, so that was actually that was a super chat. Same question, but I better read it out because it's a super chat. George H. If the internal momentum at McLaren is shifting towards Oscar, what changes will Lando be noticing in the team dynamic? Oh, I see what you mean. That's a good question. I don't think very much, because Lando's A, Zach loves him. B, he's very, very good guy. He's a very good guy, Lando, and he's got a lot of good people around him at McLaren, and they will all be, wanting Lando to be as successful as possible. I think in the garage, obviously, between every team, whether it's Lewis, Charles, whether it's Max, even Yuki now, there's competition between the mechanics. I think Mercedes try to water that down, but I think that's unhealthy to do so. I think it's very healthy to have that competition. And in the garage, I think... no, I don't think it's much different. I think from the minute Oscar showed how quick he was, I think Lando's always had to look across to see what's, proverbially, metaphorically, look across to the other side of the garage. Whereas with Daniel, he never had to do that. And that's the difference. That's always going to be the difference. And but if Lando's walking out of the garage and one of Oscar's mechanics is in front of him, Lando will open the door for him and pat him on the back, and the guy will say, hey, Lando, how you doing, buddy? It's all going to be normal. Nothing will change on that. And McLaren are very good like that too as a team, I think. So, yeah, and you've got to remember the history that Zach Brown has with Lando. And deep down inside, if he wants a driver this year to win the World Championship, it'll be Lando Norris, I would say, given how closely they've been working over the years. And as I say, how much the Norris family's invested in the whole Zach Brown McLaren future. It's all working out beautifully. Let's do it. Real Jazz says, take my money, with a thumbs up. Thank you very much, Real Jazz. It's very, very kind of you. I don't like taking money just like that at all, but thank you. So let's just have a look at some others. I'm just sort of scrolling up and down this relatively tetchy but so far cooperative chat box here. Just looking for some other super chats that I don't want to miss. That's the point. So many questions. I know what's going to happen. I'm not going to get through them all again, but we got a little bit of a break, so I'm going to do another live stream certainly before Miami. So Debbie Maffio says Crash Stappen can't handle competition. All right. Thanks for expressing your opinion. Not sure I agree with that. I think Max is pretty good in all areas of the racing drivers' vernacular, whether it be fast corners, slow corners, or handling the opposition. Okay, this is Faith, another super chat. Faith Yuzbazioglu. Sorry for my pronunciation. Hello, Peter from Istanbul. Hello there. Yeah, great circuit there in Turkey. Shame we don't race there anymore, I think. Max seems a little frustrated these days for not being able to express his opinion the way he wants to. Do you think holding inside and giving fake answers is good or bad for his mind? Thank you. I think it's frustrating not to be able to say exactly what you think at any given moment in any walk of life, is it not? And Max obviously needs to be fairly circumspect about what he says that involves the FIA or the officials or any decisions that are made. But at the same time, he's pretty good at not really worrying too much about interviews or being too much in your face about racing and his image and saying things about other drivers. He's always fairly low key on that and just gets on with his karting at Ghent and goes racing, doesn't he? And so I don't think it's a big deal for him, to be honest. And he probably quite likes the fact that, excuse me, probably quite likes the fact he's got an excuse not to have to say very much. But obviously he would love to have said after Saudi Arabia, I was completely robbed. I would have won that race. Oscar had no way of getting around that corner. I just went off to give him room. It was a completely ridiculous decision. The FIA don't know what they're doing. The whole thing's nonsense. I'm thinking about retiring. Oh, no, I'm not. I'm going to go to the Canadian Grand Prix. He'd love to have said all that. But of course, what's the point? Because it won't achieve anything, and except upset everyone, and Red Bull were quite right to say to him, don't say that. Of course he's going to say that because he's a racing driver. He's going to feel that. And but then he's going to put it behind him and he'll go to Canada and he'll try and win the Canadian Grand Prix. Simple as that. So, yeah, I think, people, to me, it wasn't even worth asking Max after the race in Saudi Arabia what he thought about that incident, because it was so clear about what he thought, A, and B, we knew that in the instant response, and B, what he was going to be doing anyway. He wasn't going to be saying anything. So why did people even bother with it? I talked to him about something else. Like, how good a start would he have made if he'd been on the inside? That would be a good question. I don't think anybody asked him that. So anyway, getting away from the super chats now. I'm going to go back to where we were in the questions. And again, thanks very much to everybody for taking part in the live stream. It's amazing, isn't it, how things are going. Scoopy Noopers says Lando needs a mental wet nurse to give him warm baths. Oh, I don't think it's that bad, Don't forget, this guy likes WRC. Any Formula One driver that's got a bit of feeling for rallying inside him is a serious player. So don't underestimate Mr. L. Norris. He will come back, and it'll be interesting to see how he goes in Miami, won't it? A circuit, obviously, where he's got great memories. And if he gets blown away by Oscar in Miami, yeah, then we should maybe start to be a little bit worried. But at the moment, I've still got lots of confidence in Lando Norris winning more Grand Prix this year, winning lots of Grand Prix this year. Very good car. And Oscar will have some bad days as well, Let's see what happens. Anyway, so okay, they're chatting amongst themselves here about somebody that should be blocked. I don't know anything about that stuff, so I'm not going to get involved in that one. But yeah, always obviously free to chat amongst yourselves. Sometime. Oh, here we go. Windsor failed as a driver, didn't have the gonads. That's interesting. When did I fail as a driver? I don't even remember I was a driver. All I ever did was race for fun and had fun. That's all I did, and learned as much as I could. What you're probably saying is you don't like my opinions about things, and you think that I'm expressing opinions about something I don't know much about. But I would just like to say this, that I was very lucky from a very early age to watch Jim Clark drive and to talk to Jim about his driving, and then to learn massively from both Carlos Reutemann and Nigel Mansell. And in Nigel's case, he's a guy that I saw in Formula 3 when he wasn't going that well. He only did 5 races in the first year in which I watched him because he didn't have any money. But almost from the start of that first race in Formula 3 that I ever saw, I saw things in Nigel's driving and the way he drove, and also in other aspects of his personality, that convinced me 100% that he had the potential to be a world champion. And I kind of took him went with him all the way to winning the world championship. So Fogley, when you've done the same, I'm very happy to address your comments. Manny Locatelli, Lewis is just baking in excuses for his possible failure at Ferrari. Well, that's a very tough thing to say. Again, a lot of this is born of stupid questions. You know, we all know that Lewis isn't as quick as Charles Leclerc now. Why do you keep saying, oh, what's going on? Just let him relax and enjoy. Ask him about some Ferrari history that he might have picked up since he joined the team, or what his favourite pasta is, or has he found any nice mountain roads near Modena where he can go out and really thrash the car, and what car does he thrash? Those are the right questions to be asking Lewis now, not, you know, what's going on. Because if he knew what was going on, he would solve the problem, wouldn't he? Alex M says, what is a short corner? I often go karting and I'm open to suggestions. Well, I don't want to ever say I've dealt with that, but a short corner is basically realizing that the corners join the straights, and the longer you can make the straight going into a corner and coming out of a corner, the faster you're going to go. Make the corners as short as possible. In order to do that, you've got to adopt a very different style of driving. You've got to be focused on a rotation point, which is your lowest minimum speed. And at a rotation point, get the car going in without understeer and coming out without oversteer. So the rotation point requires a lot of patience. But more importantly, it involves a massive amount of skill and soft touch and feel for the throttle, the pedal, and the brakes, and to manage the inevitable understeer going in, and to rotate the car at exactly the right rate and direction for the exit you want for the longer straight you've created coming out. Only about, in my opinion, only about 10 drivers in the history of Formula One have achieved that level of perfection. But I think we're seeing one now, Max Verstappen, and Charles not far behind him, and Lewis was somewhere near them both, if not alongside them, up until 2021. But I don't think anybody else on the grid at the moment is near them in that area, although Oscar Piastri and Kimi Antonelli on slow corners looked to be going in that direction. Case of Antonelli looks present tense. In the case of Oscar Piastri looked past tense, because I got the feeling that they kind of led him down, the engineers led him down the path of Lando Norris, who's a much wider turn-in, geometrical apex sort of driver. Hope that makes sense. Ed Slaughter, I think you've done a really good thing here, Ed, because you've reminded me about Peter Brock. Absolutely, totally in the mode of Pat Rafter and Don Bradman, Jack Brabham, and Steve Waugh, and of course Oscar Piastri. So yeah, absolutely. So there you go. Benzie News' showdown. Going back to Peter Brock, actually, very, very close friend of Alan Gow. I knew Peter pretty well from early days in Australia when he was actually racing his Austin A35 with a V8 in it or something ridiculous. And then I re-met him through Alan, who was very good friends when he came over and did some racing in Europe. Alan being one of my buddies as well. And we had a Starbucks with him, with Peter, literally the day before he flew back to Australia to do that rally in Western Australia, historic rally in Western Australia. And yeah, and he was just captivating. You know, he was, as you say, he wasn't Jack Brabham in that, he was not monosyllabic, that's for sure, but he was very cerebral and very calm and very spiritual, actually. So yeah, lovely guy, wonderful guy. So good at what he did. So good. Very good racing driver. He could have been Formula One, like Frank Matic, you know, another Australian that could have been right up there in Formula One had he made the choices at the right time. So there's one here from Dwayne saying Peter's talking about Nigel Mansell again. Zuz. So Dwayne, can I make a suggestion? Don't watch my channel, because Nigel Mansell for me is one of the great Grand Prix drivers, and we grew up together in many ways. And you're actually insulting me by saying that. So go away. Yep. Where's another one? They're all talking amongst themselves. Here's a much better question. Manny Locatelli. Mansell never gets the respect he deserves because he always looked like a bogan getting ready to smoke weed out of a bong. Mansell was just a tough guy racer that didn't care for the show. Not sure about the analogy there, but anyway, I accept that what you're trying to say is probably summed up by the last sentence. And no, of course he didn't care for the show. He was scared about driving the racing car and being first. And if he wasn't first, it was somebody else's fault. All racing drivers should think that way. This is from Ayrton Senna, 1989. That's a good name to have. I think George Russell is the dark horse for the title, maximising every race. All he needs is a slight performance gain from Merck, and he's there. You're not wrong. George is never going to go away, is he? And he's right on the limit every time he's in that car, and he's getting the most from the car. He's not making mistakes in the races. He's driving beautifully. So there you go. So here we go. Let's find some more now. There's a lot of funny comments coming up. I mean, if you don't like or agree with what I say, please be polite and express an opinion that makes sense. But one thing that does not make sense to me is a blind adulation of a driver because everything that driver does must be right. I mean, I've just been criticizing Nigel Mansell for anybody who wanted to listen. And there are people here saying that I only like Lando and Lewis. Actually, no, in fairness, I'm reading it now. Mull Lord says, Peter's literally spent the whole live stream praising Max and Oscar, except these guys still think he only likes Lando and Lewis. Well, thank you very much, Mull Lord. Yeah, you're right. And people just don't, well, people have very short, I don't know, it's a cliche, isn't it? They have short attention spans. It's just an excuse for not paying attention and using their brains, isn't it, really? And so I always try to be objective in the sense that I don't go down one path on one driver and think that everything that happens to him has to be perfect. And if he doesn't win a race, it's got to be all the forces against him. So Faith Yaz again. Max seems he cannot speak of his mind these days. He seems fairly stressed when answering fake answers. Do you think this is a good strategy? Oh, well, we've kind of dealt with that question. Maybe I've repeated it, but I think it's come up twice now. So as I've said, I think Max would rather not do any interviews at all, wouldn't he? I don't think he's out the sort of guy that needs to express himself. He expresses himself on the racetrack in a racing car. That's what he is. So, okay, that came up as a super chat, didn't it? That's why I've seen that one before. So, Rob, well, there are a couple that are bigger than the sport, and it's a well-known list, and Max is becoming the newest addition to it. Yeah, I mean, he's a great athlete, sportsman all round in so many ways, and the things he can do with a racing car that others can't. I mean, Lando goes on about, oh, Max should drive the McLaren. I'd love to see Max in the Red Bull. Lando in the Red Bull. Stand back, run for cover. Now, this is where somebody's got it completely wrong about me, and I've got to keep going on about this, I suppose. It's a bit boring, isn't it? Manny Locatelli says, oh no, he's talking to Ed Slaughter. I think Oscar will be humbling Max this year. Well, what you're saying is you think the McLaren is going to be a consistently better car than the Red Bull. Let's be realistic about it. Let's not talk about drivers, because there's no way Max Verstappen is a slower driver than Oscar Piastri. It's just that the Red Bull isn't as good a car as the McLaren. It's the first thing. Oscar is the new Max. Well, that's not true either. We're saying that the McLaren is the new Red Bull, I think, is what you're trying to say. Even though Peter still thinks Lando should be number one. I don't think that. I've never said that. All I've said is, if you've got Lando, keep Daniel Ricciardo. That's what I've said. Don't misquote me, please. So, there's a lot of idiotic chat going on here now. I'm not quite sure. Everybody seems to be very concerned about who's number one at McLaren. I mean, when all this number one business, when did we last have a number one driver in any team that I can think of, apart from Michael Schumacher? You know, Sergio Perez could easily be number one at Red Bull if he'd blown Max away. It's just a question who's quicker. That's what Formula One is like these days. And yes, when they get down to the point where one driver cannot win the championship and the other can, obviously the team will then tell that lesser scoring driver to make sure he doesn't take points from the team leader. It's pretty logical. I don't know why everybody's so concerned about all this. No, this Dwayne. I mean, Peter, admit Oscar is a superior driver to Lando. What do you think I've been doing for the last 2 hours? Sorry, this is actually insulting to a lot of other people who've got proper intelligent questions to ask. So let's get back. So Manny Locatelli says, my favourite tennis player was Gustavo Kuerten. That's interesting, isn't it? He used to have a big thing with Andy Murray, didn't he? Brazilian. Yeah, he's good. He's good. So there we go. I just think there's a lot of weird people. As I say, if you want to come on to this show being rude to others, stroke to me, I think you should go and look for another channel to watch, please. So here we go. And if I've misrepresented anything that anybody said, my apologies. But there's so much chat going on at the moment. It's kind of difficult to keep on top of what people are trying to say. Justin Grieger, hi Peter. Is it likely that all 10 teams will be closer with the new regs next year, or can we expect 2 distinct halves again? It's a very good question. I think more than anything, we can expect some team that hasn't been doing very much suddenly to have a very good car. That could well be Aston Martin, for example, obviously with the Honda and now with Adrian there. I think you'll suddenly see some teams going very well and other teams which don't have a great power unit all of a sudden because the power units are changing so dramatically, will be falling backwards. So I think more than thinking, will we have a grid where we've got a split down the halfway mark, I think you should be thinking, or we should be thinking, there are going to be some teams that are going to be really quick out of the box and other teams that won't be. That's basically how I perceive 2026 at the moment. I suppose Aston is the logical case, but if you take a team like, I don't know, Sauber, who seem to be right at the back at the moment going nowhere, in theory, they'll probably buy some components from some of the other teams, maybe some Renault bits. And in theory, Audi know quite a lot about doing this engine, even though part of the recovery system has not been adopted because they didn't want to give an advantage to Audi. In theory, Audi should have quite a good power plant. So, you know, there's another team that might not be last at every race, that's for sure. So David Basilui, hi Peter. Your income is always welcome. I think you mean input there. My income is not very much, so I'm not sure you would welcome it. It seems that Aston Martin is giving up the 25 season after the Alonso interview. Well, what can he say? You know, quite obvious the car is not going anywhere. And so I presume that was in response to somebody saying, when can we expect the car to be up the front, Fernando? And he probably said, well, don't hold your breath on that one, mate. So, yeah, no surprise there. Obviously, they're thinking more than any other team on the grid, 26, roll on, because we got Adrian and we got Honda engines, so exclusively as well. So it should be good. Noah Simar says, Netflix and social media has created these type of people. I think you're referring to the people that have been quite bullying on the chat today. Don't give them the attention they want, Peter. Yeah. The problem is it's quite difficult for me not to give the attention because I don't actually read any of this stuff before it comes out. And so I just click on the next one and then I start reading it and I realize, what is this going on about? So there's another one. There's another guy saying, I don't rate Daniel. I mean, this is so ludicrous. I do rate Daniel Ricciardo. And if you look at the videos I've put out over the years, you'll see how much I rate Daniel Ricciardo. What I didn't think was that Daniel post Red Bull was ever as quick as he was at Red Bull. And I certainly don't think he was as good as quick as Lando Norris when he was at McLaren. Okay, end of story. So don't misquote me. Home Email, that's another good name. If you gave Max the choice from Miami onwards to drive another car, but not the McLaren, which do you think he would choose to best battle for World Drivers' Championship? I think the Red Bull. He's already won a race with it, and he almost won Saudi Arabia. And the team is probably still the best team in Formula One in terms of how they operate in the pit lane, in the garage, overnight, getting things right when things are wrong. So why would he leave there? No way to go anywhere else, I think, apart from McLaren. If he can't go there, Murillo family, fishing. Peter, been a big fan since the 80s. Thank you so much for your contributions to motorsport. Well, thank you very much. Very nice to hear that. Thank you. Pavan K. Peter, in your opinion, who could unsettle or could unsettle Max as a teammate? You mean what teammate would unsettle Max Verstappen? Well, anybody that's pretty quick, like a George Russell or a Charles Leclerc or an Oscar Piastri, possibly a Lando Norris. Any of these guys wouldn't unsettle him, but they would do what I described Oscar Piastri doing for Lando Norris when he first joined McLaren, which is all of a sudden Lando was having to think for the first time about the other side of the garage as well as his side. What is he doing? Why is he just gone 3/10 quicker? That sort of thing. Now, I'm not saying it's because they're going to go quicker or not. All I'm saying is if you've got Charles Leclerc in the other Red Bull, Max Verstappen is always going to be thinking, what's Charles doing? You know, because I respect this guy. He is quick. That's all. And so in that sense, it would distract him slightly. Got the lawn being mown outside. And I really thought Dexter here, who's been by my side all the time, would be out there barking, but he's not. Don't worry, Dex. Just the lawn, yeah? Good boy. Good boy. So that's good. Benny's News Showdown. Peter, ban the idiotic trolls. Yeah, I'm going to get my manager to go through all this afterwards and ban those guys who are doing that. And thank you for everybody, who's said some nice comments in reply. I haven't got through to them all because it's too difficult to do that on my own here. Trailbreak 3R, hello there. I've had you before, great name. Hi Peter, is it true that Dr. Mario Tyson will make a return to Formula One, sort of like Briatore in an advisory role? Huh. Now the doorbell. You know what this could be? I'm going to go and answer that. I'm just going to, before I come back, I'm going to put up a thing called Back Soon. Don't go away, because I think this is a delivery that's important for me to take from FedEx. 1 second. Right, back again. Sorry about that. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, would that be with Sauber then? Maybe, maybe. I always quite like Mario. Good bloke. Fell out with Patrick Head, I think, didn't he, over something? Can't remember what it was. I think they had a shunt, didn't they? They did a classic rally in a BMW, from memory. But I always liked Mario. I always used to bump into him in the gym at various races as well. Good man. He's like a big cyclist, I think. So yeah, good man. Where are we at? What am I doing here? Okay, get this back. So Fausty McFowl says, well, part of Formula One is having people arguing about who's number one or what team was this or that. Yeah, I kind of get that. It's just that it seems like it's a bit like Donald Trump saying, that quaint word groceries, which we don't use anymore. It's a bit like this whole number one, number two thing. It just seems like a bit an anachronism to me. Maybe I'm wrong, because who's number one driver at... I mean, we know number one driver at Mercedes is George Russell, but that's only because he's a lot more experienced. I can tell you now, if Kimi Antonelli started winning races and George blown away, suddenly Kimi would be number one. So I just think it's not the same as the old days when we definitely had a number one and number two, and it was in the contract. I'd be surprised if any driver on the grid now, let's have a think about it. Any driver on the grid has got it written into his contract that he's the number two driver, or indeed the number one driver for that matter. I can't imagine anybody has. Do you think Yuki Tsunoda has? I don't believe so. I think he's just signed as a Red Bull driver and he does what he's told, and they don't need to do that anymore. So the whole number one, number two thing is kind of red arrows over my head, I think. Thank you, Popeyes, telling me to ignore all that internet trolling. Internet is going weird. It is. This is a good example of why a guy like Lando needs to stay away from the internet, because there's so many weirdos on there as well. So Rainer Chur, the best example right now for Formula One fans to visualize what Daniel went through the last few years is what Hamilton is going through now at Ferrari. What you mean, having too much money in your bank account? Yeah, that's probably right. I don't know. I think Lewis has had so much money for so long, I don't think that it's changed the way he goes through his life, does it? I think with Daniel, when he started to get real money from Renault, he thought, yeah, this is not a good team, but it's at least a good bank account. Where's my app? Where's my banking app? So, where's this one? Ethan Putman. Hi there, Ethan. Peter, mildly off-topic question. Have you ever been to Barber Motorsports Park in Birmingham, Alabama? And if so, which driver, past or present, do you think would have excelled there? I haven't, I'm afraid. No, I know it's a good circuit, and I know they've got a brilliant museum there and everything else. So it sounds like a difficult circuit. It's a great circuit. So not knowing the circuit, obviously, therefore, very closely at all, I would say Chris Amon. There you go. Anyone better than Chris Amon out there? He was just brilliant on particularly circuits like Saint-Gervais, and I imagine Barber Motorsport Park isn't that far away from Saint-Gervais, and Chris was phenomenal there in '68 in the Ferrari. So, yeah, I'd say Chris Amon's my man there. So where are we going? It's jumping around a bit. Kurt Pickering, have the ground effect cars made it harder to have short corners because of the very stiff suspension to keep the ride height low? No, not at all. In fact, I would say, because, I talk about short corners, we talk about short corners as a thing, and it seems as if the Formula One onboard people and stats people are starting to get their head around it as well, a little bit, maybe. I doubt it, but maybe they are. But the reality of short corners, which I do try to explain periodically, is not necessarily the short corner itself, because some corners don't lend themselves to it. And I suppose that's one of the reasons I'm not a fan of bank corners, because I don't think they really accentuate the talent of a guy like Max Verstappen compared with, say, George Russell. George is brilliant around bank corners, so is Max, but Max can't do anything different to George Russell around a bank corner, in my opinion. But the one thing that is also part and parcel, excuse the cliche, of being a great short corner driver is that in order to be a great short corner driver, you have to have unbelievable sensitivity for the car and the inputs of the car at your disposal, and the feel for the surface of the road, as drivers like Max often talk about. And so even on corners where it's very, very difficult to do anything different from, say, George Russell or Carlos Sainz, Max is still going to do it slightly differently because he has this incredibly soft touch in everything he does. And so even if you then you talk about a ground effect car with no suspension, flat bottom, whatever you want to have, a plank and everything, even then within the realms of the distortion of the tire wall, tire pressures, cambers, maybe weight for sure, load transition, how you manage the weight change, all those little things are still there for the driver who's got the talent to be a short corner driver, still to do with his touch and feel. It's all still there, 100%. So if anything, it accentuates it, because if you don't have that feel and touch, you basically have very little to play with, and that's quite a lot of people in that category, and they sort of get all lumped into a very stiff car, not much we can do with it, wide entry. Whereas you've got this guy who can still do something with a stiff car because his touch is so good. I hope that kind of makes sense. Marsbar. He's talking to A Justice. I'm an Aussie and an Oscar fan, but I feel it's too early in the season to tell how things are going to go. Of course it is. It's only, what, race 4, race 5, race 6 coming up. We've still got 150 to go. So, okay. This is from Volparella. Barber is really more of a motorcycle track. Very narrow and twisty. Oh, well, even more Chris Amon then. Absolutely. Well, good choice, Peter. Harvest Faith Ministries. Hi there. Hans. Most of it. Oh, this is to Hans. Okay. This is when I only get to see that you're talking to somebody else. Most of us watch Formula One because we like the sport, and it's exciting to see the drivers challenge and play head games. But it will be interesting if Honda and money will take Max away to Aston. Yeah, it will be. I mean, if he's there, then that's the new era, isn't it? For sure. But even if Fernando's there, they should go pretty well. How good was Jos Verstappen? You mean in the recent rally in Granada, where he drove his incredibly impressive Rally 2 Skoda Fabia? He was very impressive, I thought. 6th in the early stages. Fabulous. No, he was good. I mean, Jos was, unlike Max, he wasn't a short corner driver, but he certainly had the touch, and he certainly had the car control. He was very oversteery at a time when you could still be quite oversteery. But he was good. Yeah, he wasn't a short corner finesse driver. He was quite car controlling. What can I say? Christian Danner sort of thing, I would say, that sort of thing, that sort of driver. But great guy too. And Michael was very fond of him. Still is, for sure. I think it was football that bonded them, but they were very good together. Surf South says, Lewis and Alonso need to retire. They're both well past it. Well, try telling them that. All I can say, good luck. Hussein Mustafa, hi Peter, what makes a great circuit for racing? It's a shame you had that for racing bit at the end of it, and it just ended at what makes a great circuit. Because we all have our various opinions and feeling about racing and what makes great racing. For me, it's not necessarily overtakes. It's push and shove and attack and defense and pressure and how you sustain those things. And then beyond that, it's great corners that bring the best out in the great drivers. So I love Suzuka. I think it's a great race circuit. I think that if you're good enough, there are places to pass at Suzuka that require unbelievable levels of skill, like the outside of turn 1. Good example. So all you need is that place, and there's your great overtaking place, and then you've got great corners. So where's better than Suzuka is what I would say. You don't want lots of easy overtaking places brought to you by, DRS. It's just boring for me, and I don't like circuits that are designed around that. So that's my thing. I mean, the Nürburgring was as good a circuit as you could ever go to for watching racing, because you could watch drivers doing things in Formula One cars that you'd never see them doing anywhere else. Like, you know, taking off sideways and landing and braking with load on the car, having just landed, and things like that. It's just amazing. And, you know, I'd go out before practice at the Nürburgring, with a marshal, and he'd drop me at Flansgarten or Wipperman or somewhere like that, some really quick place. And I'd sit on the earth bank for 45 minutes, and you'd have a drink and a sandwich, and you'd be looking at your watch, and then suddenly in the distance you'd hear the sound of a Cosworth V8, and then it would get louder and louder, and you'd wait another, I don't know, 5 minutes, and the car would just go past, and it would be a Brabham BT44, all four wheels in the air, Carlos Pace, whatever, you know. And just those moments, even though it was fleeting and it was gone, the build-up was part of it, just as the build-up of Max having the two McLarens was part of the race, not necessarily overtaking him, but just being pressure, being there all the time. And that's what is racing for me. So Suzuka, Nürburgring. I've never put Spa into that, not because Jim Clark always hated Spa, but because I've just never been into the whole Spa thing, really. I mean, if it wasn't for Gilles, obviously I'd still have a soft spot for Zolder. I think that was a pretty good circuit, actually. Some nice corners at Zolder. Today's calendar, where are we looking at? Monza is still a good circuit, I think, for everything. There's a reasonable chance of a decent motor race. Plus, I love braking for the first chicane, exit the second chicane, first and second Lesmos, and then the Parabolica. They're all good corners. Silverstone's not bad in parts. It's a bit bitty, but it's not bad in parts. Barcelona, still love that bit out of turn 2, turn 3, turn 4, Barcelona, turn 9, Barcelona. Last corner, Barcelona now. They've speeded it up. So, yeah, still some good corners. But for me, Suzuka does it all. It's got it all. I haven't included Monaco in that. And I would say Monaco is one of the great circuits as well. Because, let's put it this way. If you wanted to take a mate or a relative that wanted to understand why you loved Formula One, and you just wanted to explain it to them and show them Formula One in its rawest, most impressive form, I would take them to Monaco. I'd say, look, see this huge thing here in the pit lane here with people standing around it. This is a Grand Prix car. Somebody's going to drive this tomorrow through Casino Square, through around Tabac and through Rascas. And they'll say, come on, you're joking. And then you go and see it. And it's unbelievably impressive. Again, Monaco doesn't need to deliver place changings and overtakings to justify its existence. It is incredible as an event anyway, that whole principality is closed down for a Grand Prix still after all these years. And then I think you're seeing the talent of the guys that drive these cars in absolute technicolor right in front of you. And I think Monaco is one of the great circuits because of that. Wilf's Wanderings. Hi, Peter. Do you think we've seen the best of Hamilton? Well, a lot of people love to answer those questions along the lines of, I hope not, and which would be my immediate reaction. And I would say no. I think I've still got faith in Lewis that he's going to get it together, and he's going to get that feel back. British Grand Prix, Silverstone. Maybe that'll be the turning point. Rishab Sethi. Thank you, Mr. Windsor, for everything you do and how you conduct yourself. Very grateful. Well, that's very kind. Thank you very much. I'm sorry we had a little bit of a stressful moment there with all this stuff going on. They seem to have gone away now with luck. Oh, yeah. And Mr. PWN Cake. Peter, we need old tracks like Sepang back. Agree. Well, there's another circuit that I should have mentioned. This is trouble when you're trying to think of great things, drivers, circuits, cars. You always forget things. Well, I do anyway. But yeah, Sepang, another great circuit. Wow. I love the first corner sequence there. There you could be on the outside and then be on the inside for the next corner without a problem. Then I loved those quick S's. I think it was 5 and 6, I think. Very, very quick left-hander, then right-hander. And then the last part of the lap was brilliant. And then that long straight parallel to the main straight. It's just a great circuit. Very hot and sweaty, but very good circuit. And often used to rain, which of course is a good thing. Rainer, Pavan K. Peter, thanks for sharing your knowledge. Try to, anyway. Question, if short corner drivers are always faster than geometrical apex drivers is a rule, is it fair to say that Senna was the exception that proves the rule? Well, at the risk of being controversial now, I don't think Prost was the fastest short corner driver we've ever had. I think he was a short corner driver, for sure. But I think by the time he was at McLaren with Senna, I think he'd found his sweet spot of how to keep that car on the road at all times and to leave a little bit of margin. So I don't think it was a direct comparison there between the two. And don't forget that the Prost that we saw in '88, and I've just described, was slightly away from the Prost, say, of his Renault era. It was still pretty quick, and he still won some races, a lot of races. And so kind of bears out my point. You know, he did win quite a lot of races against Senna. Now you say, oh yeah, but what about poles? Okay, what about poles? I don't think Prost ever put it on the line for pole. And I think Senna thought as much about pole as he did about racing. It meant as much to him, and that's fair enough, great. But it never did to Prost. I mean, Prost had a lot more fastest race laps than he did poles, didn't he? So the comparison, I think, actually does bear out what I say, that because he was a short corner driver of great skill, Alain Prost was able still, nonetheless, when leaving margin, to be able to still win a lot of races against Senna. And, you know, against Nigel was, you know, in the same car, Nigel was quicker than Prost by the time they got to Ferrari, for sure, and would have been had he stayed at Williams in '93, for sure. But they were both short corner drivers, but Prost was leaving that margin. I think the other thing is Senna against Mansell in '91. I mean, a lot of people love to write off '92 because Nigel had the active ride and therefore it was an unfair comparison. But in '91, Nigel had his moments with Senna in semi-wet conditions on slicks, and he was right there. So I would say Nigel. And for all those that are sick of me talking about Nigel, you can switch off now because, you know, this is how good I think Nigel. I would say Nigel was as quick as Senna in a passive car, providing it was a good car, as good a car as Senna was in. And I think he was. And I think the reason people don't believe that today or don't talk about that today is because there was an aura about Senna from day one, which grew and grew, and then obviously massively exploded when he sadly lost his life. And the aura around Nigel was a completely different aura. It was, who is this guy from Birmingham that's overrated, doesn't have much talent, doesn't deserve to be in Formula One, and should stop moaning? That was basically the aura around Nigel until he eventually did get into Formula One in a decent car and started winning races. And then it was, oh, he's ham-fisted and aggressive and he's just a street fighter. And what they were never seeing was Nigel's fingertip touch in the wet. And that's where the two auras are different. And that's where people, I think, have confused reality with auras. Anyway, interestingly, the chat has just stopped. But interestingly also, it's 2 o'clock Spanish time. So I'm going to call it a day here and thank everybody very much for being involved. Even those to whom I've spoken relatively harshly. You know, probably spoken in the heat of the moment, like Max Verstappen. I shouldn't be saying too much when the wrong sort of question comes up. But nonetheless, at the end of the day, you know, it is a bit dispiriting when people constantly misquote you. Anyway, I'm not sure if we've still got a live stream, but if we have, I'm signing off now. If we haven't, then no reason to sign off. But let's have a look and see. YouTube, I think, disappeared. Thank you for watching. Yes, I think we're live again now. Looks like, incredibly, just on 2 hours, it looks like something just cut off the feed there. I don't know what. It's not the internet. I'm hardwired in. But anyway, we got to the end of it, I think. And so it behoves me to say thank you very much for watching. Sorry about that last minute glitch, but out of my control. Maybe it's the lawnmower. Maybe he's gone through some cable or something now. And I'll be doing another live stream before we get to Montreal for the Canadian Grand Prix. Try and get through some more questions. Apologies to those who sent in questions or wrote questions, which I wasn't able to get to, but I will try and do that next time around. So thanks for watching, and I'm just going to get ready with my other bit of page here. Thanks for watching, and see you again very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.